Can start.
Okay, we're gonna start up. This is December 17th, 2021. I just wanted to get that established. And yeah, where we left off, you were delivering papers. And what I want to hopefully get today is I want to talk about, I know you have ideas, and then I want to try to get up to like the war and how you went into the military. If there's other things within like your late childhood, your teenage years, I'd love to touch upon any of that stuff and then eventually I want to move into, moving into the war and such. So that's the type of stuff I would like to get to today, if possible.
Okay, but we let's see. My mind is all muddled up now.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
You can keep going.
We were talking about actually. I was delivering paper. The Southwest Way was 4 days a week. I think I told that was Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. But I got a job with the Examiner, and that's an everyday morning. I had about roughly 50 papers to deliver. I got up every morning at 4:30, got dressed, and got on my bike and went down to the store where the delivery trucks left the papers. I had to buy the papers. The paper cost a nickel, and I bought them for 3 cents. So I made 2 cents on every paper I delivered. I had 50 of them. So I was making $1 a day at that time. And rain or shine, I delivered papers. I would get up. I had problems with having a regular breakfast. Now, on my ride to the location where incidentally, this was a store with a storefront and all that, a regular store, and the guy that managed the area rented the store. The newspaper never paid for anything. You had to buy papers from the newspaper, and you made your money by selling them for a profit. Okay, so on my way to the store, I always passed a bakery. Now, these small bakeries, and these guys get up earlier than I got up in the morning to bake all their goods. To this day, I'm not sure exactly how they do it. When you go into a bakery store and there's a display thing where they have all their baked goods. Sometimes these were a 1, 2, maybe a 3-man operation. It's remarkable what they do. In any event, the aroma of the baked goods always got me. So it got to the point where I would stop. I would buy a half a dozen glazed donuts for 25 cents. And I'm looking at you, Ryan, now, and I would on my bike, I would eat a couple of them on the way to work, and while I was folding papers, munch on them too. And many of the other delivery boys, they did the same thing. Most of them brought food from home. They were eating their breakfast, but I survived on glazed donuts. I was eating maybe 3 or 4 times a week 20, 30 donuts a week, lots of sugar. Wasn't good for me at the time. But then what did I know? What did I know? Also,
I'm just thinking that since you've learned you've lived to 98, so I'm starting to think that maybe I need to have more glazed donuts in my life right now.
well,
Maybe
actually,
that's the secret.
okay, I'm technically labeled with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. I'm not on any medication. I used to be on a medication that they later found out was a no-no. They had taken me off. This was a few years ago, and I was passed from one doctor to another when, at my age, I run through doctors like water through your open fingers. In any event, the latest doctor actually says you're diabetic in name only. You're branded. I try to avoid sugar, but I've learned one thing: when I have a cookie or some candy or anything like that, it actually helps me. This morning I took my glucose reading. It was 95. It seldom goes over 106. My A1C is 6, which is well below the label of 7. Okay, so, but enough about my diabetes.
Sorry to distract you.
Okay. Delivering papers in the morning, you also have to deliver them in fair weather or foul weather. Soon after I got the job, I had my first excursion in the rain, and my dad, in one of the few times he showed a lot of little concerns for me, it started raining in the late afternoon and early evening of this particular day. So he took me to what's called an Army and Navy store. The Army and Navy store originated from World War I, when surplus war goods were sold. And he bought me a pair of called oilskins. They were trousers and a jacket and a hat that looked more like a fireman's hat with broad brims on them to protect your face. In any event, we went out and bought that. And the next morning, for my first time, I got on my bike and drove in the rain to the paper store. The papers were a little late that morning, apparently because of the inclement weather. But when they arrived, papers were dry. There's no point in working delivering us wet papers. And we got the papers, and the only protection we had for the papers in those days was wax paper. I had to buy that too, incidentally. Anyway, we would have these sheets of wax paper. We would fold the papers and try to fold them in such a way as they didn't get wet. And I delivered papers in the rain. I don't remember getting a lot of complaints about wet papers, so apparently I did a decent job. Okay, this went on. I was by now probably in the low 11th grade, something like that, and this went on for about a year or so. And then one day, riding home from school one afternoon, I'm going down Florence Avenue, going west on Florence Avenue, and I passed a small used car lot. I saw the lot before because when I would take the bus to school before I got my bike, this was at Florence and San Pedro Street. I would walk after school before I was riding the bike to school. I would walk from school north on San Pedro Street to Florence, then take a bus west to Vermont, get off in Vermont. And I could walk from 72nd Street to 61st Street, which is 10 blocks, which I would do sometime, or I could take a streetcar. So we drive past this, and I see this 1932 Ford Roadster, a Model A, had a 4-cylinder engine in it. And there was a price in the window of $69. Well, actually, I had more than $100 in a bank account by this time. I stopped and looked at it. Now, I was only 17 or 18 years old. I had just gotten my driver's license, and I was looking at the car, and this salesman came out, and he could see who I was. I was a student, but to save a long story, I bought the car. I was just tickled pink. But what I didn't know, the car was somewhat unusual. It wasn't a 32 Model B or Model A. It was actually a 1930 Model A Roadster. This was in the early days of hot rodding. And the car was painted a golden yellow color and red. I have a picture of the car around somewheres. If I find it, I'll show it to you. In any event,
that'd be great.
The car had a special head on it. Model A's had what was called a flathead, in which the valves are in the block. But this one had a special head on it, in which the intake valve was in the head, but they retained the exhaust valve in the block. It was like a hybrid head, and it had a 2-speed rear axle. I think it was a Ruxel. I'm not sure. I was later to find out that the reason that the guy that modified the car originally had pounded out the center bearing of the engine, so the only way you could run it was with a retarded spark. They neglected to tell me this when I bought it, and I was soon to find out. The car would run, but he had to run it on with the spark. Now, under the steering wheel, you had 2 levers. One was spark, advance, and retard, and the other one was a hand throttle, in which you could either had a foot accelerator or it had a hand throttle under the steering wheel. You could go to a fast idle. And again, let's cut to the chase. Well, the pounded out center main bearing made its presence known with a knock, a pound. And when you retarded the spark, it took a lot of the power out of the engine, and allowed the thing to run reasonably quiet for a noisy engine. In any event, I took it into, I was taking auto shop then and the sheet metal shop in school. And when the auto shop, I told my teacher, my instructor, what I had. And what we did, not necessarily in chronological order, was we put the car on a hoist. Now, this was not a hoist like you can picture, where it was an air driven hoist with a big plunger in the center, lifting the whole thing up. This was a lift, and which was about 3 feet above the ground, and then had a ramp, removal ramp at one end to drive the vehicle up on. Then you had maybe 3 feet underneath the car to work. We would use a roller, which was a small flat board, if you want to call it that, with rollers on it. You laid on your back and you would roll under the car. We got the car on a rack, took off the pan, and we took off the center main bearing cap. And the thing was pretty well pounded out. And the reason that happened with the head on there, the 40 horsepower engine that was the Model A engine then was developing more like 70, 75 horsepower. And the four-cylinder Model A block only had a center main. Most modern four-cylinder blocks have a main bearing between each rod bearing, but that's not how they did it then. Even the flathead Ford V8 only had a center main. In any event, in order to replace the bearing, that would mean the engine would have to come out completely dismantled. It'd have to be what's called the main bearing caps put on, and it would be line bored, in which all 3 bearing caps would be bored out at the same time. They would pour Babbitt in special molds they would attach, and then they would be reamed out to the proper size within maybe 1/1000th of an inch or something like that. We weren't going to take out the engine, but what we could do is fix the bearing cap. That's the lower cap that we took off. The instructor helped me on that, and in effect, what it amounted to was we took out the 2000th brass shim that was between the bearing cap and the block, and the instructor helped me with a hot iron, just pour some, it was like solder, except it wasn't. It was it looked like solder. It was lead, a mixture of lead and tin. We put it into the bearing cap, and he would scrape it out. The instructor would scrape it out until it fit reasonably well. And then by putting the bearing cap back on, tightening it up all the way, all the excess solder came out, if you want to call it that. Then we take the bearing cap off, and we can see the imprint that the main bearing had left on it. He would clear the oil slots in the bearing and cut away all the excess. And then he would put on the bearing, the exposed crank bearing center, he would put a bluing material on it. And then by putting the bearing cap on again, revolving the crankshaft, when you took it off, you could see where the high and the low spots in the bearing cap were. And the instructor showed me how to lightly scrape away where the high spots were. And it took about a day or so to do this. I don't remember, but we had a reasonable half a bearing left in there again. And then by replacing the shim that we took out, we restored our proper clearance in the bearing. And that's how I drove the car for the rest of the time I owned it. Going into the 12th grade, on the I've already expressed myself about being put back half a grade. Let me see where my head is now. Okay. One day, I think I saw an ad in the paper. I'm not sure how I saw it, in which Western Union was looking for messenger boys. Now I was still delivering papers, and they didn't give a phone number as I remember, but there was an address. And one weekend, I went down there, and they hired me. I had a car. They hired me. Okay. Now, I was just going to get paid either 25 or 29 cents an hour plus 15 cents a mile on my car. And what I would do is I got out of school about roughly 3 o'clock. I would on Fridays, Saturdays, and sometimes on Sunday, I would deliver telegrams in the downtown area of Los Angeles. Now, instead of $30 a month, I was making more like $70 a month. Okay, so let's move on. I was, let's see, we moved from 61st Street to Leimert Park on 4207 and a half. I forget the name of the street. If I saw the name on a map, I would recognize it. In Leimert Park. This was in the late summer or early fall of 1941. Just about this time, I already reiterated what had happened to me in the sheet metal shop about working on aircraft structures and surfaces, as they called it.
That was after the messenger job.
This was after the messenger job, but before the war, where President Roosevelt had promised us 50,000 airplanes a year in the coming year. I was working at Douglas Aircraft Company, swing shift, going to school in the morning. And this went on until one day in December when we were going to go to a football game and see we didn't have a major league team. We had the the Bulldogs, I think they were called. We were going to Gilmore Park, which was located in on just off Beverly Boulevard, just east of Fairfax. That Gilmore Field is long gone, but we were getting ready to go to the ball game when either my mother or Shirley came in the room saying, there, there's there's something going on at Pearl Harbor. And we turned on the radio, and we heard the reports. There was a lot of confusion at that time. Nobody knew what was going on, or what. Guides would be telling us what would happen. They're waiting for reports from Pearl Harbor, but it was the start of the war. I remember very, very much. I saw my mother and dad looking at me, and I knew what they were thinking. And in a sense, my stomach was in my throat. I think we decided by going to we were going to go to the football game that day. I'm not sure what happened that day, but I do know I continued going to school. I graduated in the winter of 42. I should have graduated in the summer of 41. I was in that period. I was also working at the Douglas Aircraft Company, and I worked there until in November of 42. Now, what happened? My cousin Stanley and me, we had registered for selective service, but we both had low numbers. Luckily, way down the line. So I continued. We continued working, and until we could see that our numbers were coming up. Stan and I, of all my cousins, we were the closest. He was about 9 months older than I was, but
Seem to have technical difficulties. Let's see if we can get him back. Okay, we're technical difficulties. You just started to talk about basically going into the war. You and Stanley had low, was it draft numbers?
yes, but we can see.
Who established who Stanley is? Who is Stanley? Because actually, I
go on.
Like who is like, for me, who exactly is Stanley? And for anyone on the recording.
Okay, I've talked about my father and his family. He had two sisters and a brother. The two sisters were Molly and Seal. The brother was Dewey. Okay, Seal was married to a guy named Jack Sterling. Dewey was married to a lady named Rose. Molly was married to, Molly was Stanley's mother. Now, now, now
Okay.
does that place Stanley? Stanley was my cousin.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to
Okay.
figure it's.
Okay. So we went down to the recruiting station, which was in Inglewood. Incidentally, Stanley was, let me regress here a little bit. Stanley was living with us. I might have mentioned earlier that Stanley's father died in 1935. This was maybe 7 or 8 years prior. After he died, Aunt Molly and Stanley, Dick and Betty, Dick and Betty were, it's actually Elizabeth. She hated being called Betty. Moved back to Denver. Stanley graduated high school a year before I did, and after he graduated, he wanted to get out of Denver, so he came back with us and lived with us. 1941, 42. I forget the years. Originally, my mother had a friend who had a relative with an auto shop on Washington Boulevard, in which they rebuilt car parts, generators, starters, carburetors, water pumps, and a lot of the accessories going on an engine. And the job was originally intended for me. Since I was still in school, Stanley came out, we generously referred the job to Stanley, and that's the only job he ever had. That he worked there for some 40 or 45 years after that. Okay, but that's something else. Stanley and I went down there, and because of the I had an apprentice certificate for sheet metal that is specializing aircraft structures and services. I thought I could get a striker rating, and striker means something that that's going to guide you in your naval work. I wanted to work on aircraft and structures and surfaces. That's what I had a good education in. But they didn't give you individual tests. They gave us a test in which they ask all kinds of questions pertaining to it might be office work or whatever it is. But in answering questions, apparently they needed machinist mates at that time, because this was a period in which they built hundreds of landing craft. They were building destroyer escorts, auxiliary ships, all powered with diesel engines or steam engines. So they gave us a test, and they offered both Stanley and myself a striker rating and a fireman's second rating. Now, at that time in the Navy, the ratings, they were the deck ratings and the deck force ratings and the engineering ratings. Deck force ratings had a blue stripe around their right shoulder, so you could see right away what they were. All enlisted men, the petty officers of the deck force had what was called an eagle on their shoulder, and the number of stripes, they're shaped a lot like the Army had I think they're called chevrons. If you had one chevron, you were third class, two chevrons, second class, and three chevrons, first class. When you became a chief, which would be in the same pay grade as a top sergeant in the Army, you changed your uniform into officers' clothing. That is, trousers, jackets, white shirts, and ties. Okay. In any event, they offered us a rating of fireman's second. Fireman's second would have been in the same pay grade as a corporal in the Army or the Marine Corps. The pay was $66 a month. And ordinarily, when you entered when you enlisted, you were what's called a recruit. And recruits got $50 a month. Right away, I was making $16 a month more than most of my fellow recruits. In any event, this was in mid-November. I was still working at Douglas Aircraft Company. And I tried to ask questions about what happened. They wouldn't even listen to me. In any event, I decided, well, it is what it is, so I took it. And both Stanley and myself we were sworn in. We were in the Navy now. They sent us home saying, we'll call you when we need you. Okay, this was in mid-November. On Thursday or Friday, which would have been the 29th or the 30th or 31st of December, I forget which, Stanley got notice to report for duty. This was on a Friday, and he was gone Saturday. On Saturday, I got a notice to report for active duty, but this was Saturday. But at that time, they were not taking enlistments on Sundays. Now, Sunday happened to be New Year's Day. I think January 1st. It happened. I got some tickets for the Rose Bowl game. I'm not sure how we got them, but on Sunday, January 1st, I went to the Rose Bowl game with my dad and somebody else. I don't remember. I remember who played in there. It was UCLA and Duke University. I don't. Well, let's see. My mind is fuzzy about the game or what happened, but I do know that the quarterback was Bob Waterfield. You can check that up, and I do know that they had an end named I can't think of his name, but he was later to play. He was the first Black African American to play in the major leagues. What was his name?
Sorry, I was looking at say that again. I was actually trying to find the game. It was the 1943 Rose Bowl game.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, who are you asking about? You'll have to say it again to me.
Okay, Bob Waterfield was the quarterback.
Okay.
And the African American end on it was later to break the color barrier and played for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I can't think of his name. Damn it.
Oh, sorry. I don't know who it was. Sorry. Now I
You
just
can't think of it either.
You're talking about Jackie Robinson?
Jackie
No.
Robinson, right.
Well, I was thinking not baseball, in football. So I wasn't
Jackie Robinson.
I was in a different sport by mind. So I don't know football as well.
Jackie Robinson was at UCLA, and he played for the UCLA. And anyway, they connected for some kind of a long pass. It's a record-breaking thing. But it's fuzzy in my mind. It's just that we went to the football game that day, and the next morning I was in the Navy. Stanley was the last, his company was the last company of 1942. I think it was company number 1129 or 1229. I was 42, 1229, I believe was his company. That means that there were 1,229 companies formed at San Diego Naval Station in 1942. I was in company number 43-3. I'm looking at the picture of my company right now up on the wall. You've seen it.
Yeah.
I still see the little note you put on there. It says, "Where's Bob?" It's still up there.
I don't think I put that there. Someone else must have. I don't think I there.
I thought you put that there. Okay. Yeah, in any event, whoever put it on there, it's still there. I look at that and I can hardly believe that actually happened, but it did. It did. Okay. We were there roughly 8 or 9 weeks for recruit training. One day, sometime in I think it was mid-March, something like that, Stanley was in a different, we were kind of remote when we were down there. We couldn't see each other every day, but we kept in close contact. We were both down there together. And then one day he looked me up and he told me he was on a draft list, that he was leaving the next day, had no idea where he was going. And we said goodbye, and I wouldn't see him again for about 2.5 years. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Dick, Stan, and Bob. Dick, Stan, and Bob. Okay.
That can't be you. That shows a person with hair. There's a person with hair. All three of them have hair.
I had hair then. Okay. Okay. Stan is I believe on the left. Stan's on the left. The Dick's in the center. I'm on the right. And as you can see, I've got 2 chevrons on my sleeve. I was a machinist mate 2nd class. Stan was machinist mate, motor machinist. He was a machinist mate 1st class. How did that happen? Okay, you see the picture.
Yeah, it's a nice picture actually.
Okay, this was taken sometime in the midsummer of 1944. uh, when Stan shipped out, he eventually ended up a place called New Caledonia. and which he ended up as a fireman aboard the APA, that's a Troop Transport 27, the George Clymer. He spent his entire naval career there, and he had opportunities to advance in grade, which he did. You see the chevron on my left sleeve there.
Mm-hmm.
And all the time I somehow or other at the landing craft school on in San Diego, and later with the amphibious force that is learning how to pilot a LCVP or an LCP, the landing craft. Somehow they decided I was very good at teaching people how to do that, completely out of my rating. In any event, what that did was destroy any chances I had of advancing in my rating to first class. So that's how I spent my naval career. Stanley was drafted overseas and landed a berth. In the meantime, the next day, after he was gone, my name appeared on a draft list, and that was sending me to the diesel school at the University of Missouri in, where is the University of Missouri now? Columbia, Missouri. Yeah. And I was there for 3 months. And the last week before graduation, I got sick. I got the mumps. Can you believe that? So I was in the hospital for 2 weeks while my class graduated and dispersed. I was later to find out of 160 guys in the class, I was number 10 in the class. And if I hadn't had the bumps, I could have had my choice of where to go with destroyer escorts, auxiliary ships, literally any berth that was available and was open. And so they put me where people with my rating were, and that was with the amphibious forces in San Diego and at the internal combustion engine school in San Diego. And I spent most of the war there. You can say what you want about it. In late January or early February of 1945, I was shipped out on a transport and went to Hawaii. I might have mentioned there when I was in Hawaii, while I was waiting to be assigned to a berth, they had me running a taxi service boat from all the ships that were tied up at buoys in the East and West Lock and Center Channel at Pearl Harbor. That's where I saw Stan. That was after this picture was taken, maybe 5, 6, 7 months after this picture was taken. Okay, Dick, in the meantime, you see him in uniform there. He just went into the service. When Dick registered for draft, one of the things they do when you register is they give you a physical. And they claimed they found a heart murmur with him. So he was a 4F'er. 4F means not available for draft. As the war progressed and they were building up for the invasion of Japan, and they started needing more men, a lot of 4Fs were re-examined, and all of a sudden his heart murmur disappeared, and so Dick was drafted in the Army. Now, all this time, Dick was working at the Douglas Aircraft Company in El Segundo. And he was employed in, let's see, what would you call it? Where you, employees had a time clock to punch in. What you do, you put a card in the clock and you punch it and tell the time you came to work and what time you came to work. And Dick worked in an office that tabulated all the time. Anytime after you clocked in and you'd done a job, all jobs had a reference number. You would sign in on the reference number when you started it, and you would sign out when you finished it, so they could tabulate the cost of certain jobs and things like that. Well, that's what he did. And he did that for the 2 or 3 years he was at 4F. When they drafted him into the Army, he went right on doing virtually the same thing for the Army. After, so that's what he did in the Army. When the war was over, since he was drafted late, he had a low number for getting out. They took the time you spent in the service and where you were, and they added that up to points. And when the points you had became eligible for discharge, that's when you got out. In any event, Dick went on to be based in Tokyo at a place called the Atachi Building in Tokyo until maybe 8 or 9 months after the war. He worked in Tokyo in a building that the Army had taken over, and so he went to Japan, but under completely different circumstances than I would have, or Stan would have been there had we had to do an invasion. We knew an invasion was coming because that's all prior to in November of the mid-fall of 1944 and the early spring of 1945. That's what we did when Okinawa became available to us. We were in Okinawa practicing landings, practicing defensive moves we would make had we had to make a landing, etc., and all that. Sometimes these would go on as long as 36 and 48 hours at a stretch without stopping.
Let's get into that.
It was a grueling experience.
I'd love to. I think maybe this is a good kind of stopping point. We've kind of gone. We've gone fairly fast.
5, okay. It's 5 after. Yeah, let's stop.
But I want to come back to. I want to hear more about what you were doing during the service or during the war, and about being in San Diego, and we'll get into being on the ship. I want to get into some of that in more detail. We went kind of a broad overview, right? I think that's actually really good. It gives me some idea what we can dive into next time.
That's where we start next time.